oil prices are up this morning. Take a look. We've got Brent at 115.56, up 2%. Crude oil is at 111.20, up 1.5%. But that's way down from the highs of the year. The national average for the gallon of gasoline right now has dropped below $5 a gallon. It's at $4.96 right now. Joining us right now is the Schork Group principal, Stephen Schork. Stephen, great to see you. Your reaction to these moves in terms of gasoline pulling back. Do you see that as a positive for a long-term move?
Oh, at $4.96, Maria, absolutely not. We're still in unprecedented levels at this point. Levels, Maria, that Americans simply cannot afford. When we look at the current rate of inflation, real disposable income, what we actually have to spend in this high-priced environment, is now growing at the fastest pace in 10 years. Our savings rates are at the lowest point in 14 years. And credit card debt, Maria, is growing at the fastest pace in 10 years. So clearly, we are running out of money and we are accumulating debt. And as a matter of fact, our debt being held on credit cards now is over $1 trillion, which is an all-time record. My fear, Maria, going into this summer is people are so pent up, so fed up with COVID that they're going to go on their vacations. Gasoline demand, despite these prices, is very strong. So they're going to continue to spend come heck or high water because they want to get out. They've got that cabin fever, and they're going to reconcile the bills when they come due in the fall. And that said, Maria, we have never had an environment like this with these high prices, not just at the pump, but also more importantly at the grocery counter, and we've never avoided recession. So we are on the cusp of recession if we're not already in recession. But bygone, Maria, we are definitely headed towards recession.
Yeah, no, I know. I know. I think we probably are in a recession right now, by the way. But Stephen, in terms of the summer driving season, today's the first day of summer. When do you expect? Is it July and August? That's the peak months for gasoline. And what about the president's idea? He's now considering a federal gas tax holiday. It could come by the end of the week, this announcement. Do you think that would move the needle on getting prices down?
Well, the federal tax is 18 cents, whoopee. So if we just want to do the simple math, we'll take another 18 cents, so at $4.96. Now we're talking national gasoline around $4.75. Maria, that is still 15 cents more than what we were paying a month ago before the Memorial Day holiday. So we're not even in the peak demand season, to your point. We have to get, once we hit the 4th of July holiday, and in July and up through Labor Day is when we consume the most gas. And at these current prices, even with the current pullback, we're still looking at prices that are in unbelievable levels, once unthinkable levels just a year ago. So the president's move is just like the SPR. Yes.
Yeah. What about the president's trip to Saudi Arabia? You were going to mention the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The president keeps talking about that as his solution to high gasoline prices. But he's also going to take a trip to Saudi Arabia. And Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm said that the president is planning to ask the Saudis to pump more oil. She also said he's going to have a one-on-one with the Crown Prince as gasoline prices are at a record high. Stephen, what do you make of this trip? What are you expecting to come out of it?
It's an absolute disgrace, Maria. He is going to Riyadh to ask a man that he was just a few months ago still calling a murderer. He is now going to go to him and ask him, when's the last time the president went to Houston, Maria? When is the last time the president reached out personally to the industry in Houston and our friends up in North, up in Calgary, and asked them to increase production? So here, once again, we have a president that... here's a president who would rather talk to terrorists than Texans. And he is going to Riyadh. He is going to another socialist thug down in Venezuela, trying to get them to increase production. Being that Venezuelan, that oil is the dirtiest oil in the world. He'd rather have Venezuela put more oil on the market than people from Texas put more oil on the market. His moves are an absolute disgrace. This move to go into Riyadh, the gasoline tax holiday, it is just another gimmick from an administration that never has and has yet to have a cogent energy policy with regard to fossil fuels.
Yeah. Well, let me get one more question in real quick. Jonathan Madison, jump in here, Jonathan.
Absolutely. Stephen, just making reference to your comments on the gasoline tax holiday. There are certain prices here in the state of California gas prices that are as high as $8 and $9 per gallon. What do you say to the towns that are dealing with these kinds of prices, and in terms of what this tax holiday, this gas tax holiday, is actually going to do and how it's actually going to impact those folks?
Yeah, people go to the polls. You have the gasoline prices you have because you have the government that you have in Sacramento. You've continued to kick this can down the road. You have a dearth of refinery capacity. You're more beholden now to imports coming in from South America. So therefore, you embrace politicians that will embrace the industry. I'm not saying push out solar. Solar makes a lot of sense in Southern California. Wind in Central California until the Santa Ana's blow in November makes a lot of sense. But you know what? Embracing the fossil fuel, the other part of the equation, makes a lot of sense also. So I'm sorry, California, you have the gasoline prices you have because this is the way you voted. You want it differently? Go to the polls in November.
All right, Stephen, we'll leave it there. Great to see you this morning, Stephen. Thanks very much. Stephen Short joining us on this energy space, which is expensive.
Oil companies need to step up. We are calling on them to do the right thing, to be patriots here, and not to use the war as an excuse or as a reason to not put out a production, to not do the capacity that is needed out there, so that the prices can come down.
Well, that was White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday, shifting the blame from Putin to the oil companies now for the price of gasoline, record high. She's calling on them to be, quote, patriots. Joining me right now is Ohio Congressman Bill Johnson. He's a member of the Budget and Energy and Commerce Committees. Congressman Johnson, I'm not sure if the White House understands the way the oil markets work. Your reaction to their calls for the oil companies to be patriotic and send gasoline prices lower?
So irresponsible, Maria. I represent about 800,000 patriots, people that are getting up every day right now paying over $5 a gallon for gasoline. Look, if they control the rheostat on gas prices at the White House, it's not Vladimir Putin, it's not the oil companies. It's 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue that controls the rheostat. They can take gas prices up. They can bring gas prices down. They can do so. They can bring gas prices down by opening up oil and gas production on federal lands. The American Exploration and Production Council says we get about 24% of our oil and gas off of federal lands, public lands. They've stymied that. We don't have the pipelines and the infrastructure necessary to get that oil to market, to the refineries. The White House is doing everything it can to keep these gas prices high, at the same time blaming everybody else except their failed policies. This is such a sad situation we're in.
Well, it's quite extraordinary, actually. I mean, to hear the president get all tough trying to make the American people believe that it's the oil company's fault that oil prices are where they are after this White House canceled leases, did a whole host of executive orders making it increasingly tough to actually do business with fossil fuel companies. Even the Securities and Exchange Commission is sending out new rules for corporate America to follow as it relates to climate change. And yet they're there with this, muster and this toughness against the oil companies. And nobody calls them out. It's absolutely outrageous.
It is outrageous because they want these high gas prices. The president has made it very clear. He plans, and his idea is to eliminate the use of fossil fuels in America. And by the way, the rest of the world is not going to do that. Over 90% of the world's energy comes from fossil fuels, Maria. It's not wind and solar. And why our president seems to think that our country has to do without it is beyond me. But they want these high gas prices. They want these high energy costs, which are driving up the cost of everything. It takes energy to manufacture a product. It takes energy to get that product to market, to get to the store to buy it. It's crazy what they're doing. Again, they hold the rheostat. They can turn them up or down.
That's right. Yes, I understand that. Look, can I ask a question? Why is our energy secretary trading stocks? Jennifer Granholm reportedly exercised $1.6 million in electric car stock options. As a Washington Post reporter complains, high gasoline prices are not actually pushing America to transition to green energy, writing, quote, the United States is struggling to squeeze opportunity out of an energy crisis that should have been a catalyst for cleaner domestic produced power, Congressman. And then you've got Jennifer Granholm exercising stock options on electric car.
Yeah, you know, most people that I represent in eastern and southeastern Ohio, they can't afford electric vehicles. You know, Secretary Granholm, it's mind-boggling that they say one thing out in public and they do another thing in private. If everybody in my district had an electric car, Maria, it would not make a fraction of a difference compared to harvesting our natural gas and oil in terms of climate change.
Yeah.
And that's what they say they're going for. This is all about control. It is not about carbon. And they're trying to raise the prices of everything through this assault on fossil energy in order to meet their goal.
Yeah, no, it's intentional. We know that they're trying to jam through this climate agenda. But how inappropriate for the Energy Secretary of the United States to be pushing electric vehicles at a time that she's actually exercising $1.6 million in electric car stock options.
Yeah, it is. You know, one thing that people don't consider, you take an electric vehicle costing somewhere between $60,000, $80,000, depending on the model that you buy. Do you know that battery has a shelf life? It has a lifespan. And when that battery goes out, Maria, how many people do you think that live in rural Appalachia, where I represent, can afford the $12,000 to $15,000 that it costs to replace an electric vehicle battery? You're not going to AutoZone and getting a battery for $49.95.
No, you're not. Congressman, thanks very much for your leadership on this issue. Incredibly outrageous story out of the White House with all of this misinformation about gasoline prices. Congressman, we'll stay on the story. Good to see you, Bill Johnson, in D.C. this morning.
For more on all of this, we are now joined by Republican Congressman from Texas and member of the House Financial Services Committee, Lance Gooden. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us on your Saturday. We appreciate it. Nice to see you. I want to first start off with these fresh Fox polls. Let's bring up this one in particular about the financial situation that Americans are finding themselves in. It really paints the dire picture that we are in right now. 47% of Americans that were polled here say they are falling behind, Congressman. That is quite a ways away from the 27% back just a year ago when, by the way, we were still coming out of the pandemic. Congressman, last week I talked with a man in Nevada, a father of two, who told me that he is thinking about walking to work now in 109-degree weather out in Las Vegas because he cannot afford gas. Many people are finding themselves in this situation. This is not the American dream. People have jobs, but this is not the American dream. Where do you see it going from here? When does it get better?
Well, unfortunately, I worry that it won't get better for quite some time, hopefully long before House Republicans and hopefully Senate take control in January. But the Biden administration is continuing to pour expensive gasoline on the fire here. They refuse to acknowledge that this is their fault. They're blaming Russia. They're blaming oil and gas companies, who I'll add are at max capacity. We're asking for more capacity. We're asking for this government to get out of the way and release the full potential of the American energy industry, which President Trump did before he left office. And unfortunately, between now and when Republicans take over, I worry that things will get worse. My constituents are feeling the pinch, and it's a very tough one. Single moms are feeling very much an increase in prices at the grocery store, at the gas pump. Senior citizens are very much struggling, and the American people are fed up, and this president is pointing fingers at everyone but himself. And we need the president to step up, accept responsibility, and change course.
Yeah, let's talk about inflation because that's only getting worse as well. The Fed took a pretty aggressive move this week in raising the interest rates by 3/4 of a point. And some economists are saying that this is going to get us into a recession pretty fast. The administration, though, says that that is not inevitable. What do you make of this? Do you think it's inevitable?
The answer is I don't know. I certainly don't trust anything this administration says. I do have some faith in Jerome Powell. I believe that he knows that he's got to help get the president out of this mess, even if it's not his fault. But unfortunately, one of the problems we're facing is a result of this excessive spending the Democrats were pushing. If you recall back in March, when Build Back Better seemed to have a chance, when the American Rescue Plan was passed, Republicans like myself were criticized and mocked and called heartless, and now we've all been vindicated. And in fact, all this money that's been poured into the economy has proven disastrous and increased inflation. We have Democrats admitting that Build Back Better should never even be considered. And what we on the Republican side are saying is all this unspent money, I believe there's $500 billion or so from this March package. It needs to be pared back. We need to stop pumping dollars into the economy. We need to pull back. We need to get inflation under control and avoid a recession if we can.
Let's get some more reaction from you on these latest Fox News polls. President Biden, his approval rating continues to sink. Let's bring this one up. 57% now view him negatively. 42% view him positively. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And one of the biggest criticisms that this administration continues to take, particularly the president, Congressman, is that they're not taking responsibility. Yes, things are bad. Some things might be out of his hands, but to not take responsibility and to continue to blame things on whether it's Putin or whether we're still coming out of COVID or the supply chain crisis, anything and everything except for what the administration is doing. What's your reaction to these polls?
I think that the gas prices are going to be a killer for him between now and the midterm elections in just a few months. There are very few things that could improve to help him and help Democrats keep Congress. I can't imagine them doing it because I can't imagine them getting to the point where they actually admit that they shouldn't have approved all of this spending earlier in the year, where they should back off this Build Back Better plan, where they should actually come out and say, let's unleash the full potential of the U.S. energy industry. Until that happens, I think we're on a crash course for Democrats come November. But the one thing I hear back home and from this poll so frequently is this administration doesn't take responsibility. I think that'd be a great first step for the American people to see this Biden administration say what we're doing is wrong, let's change course.
And Congressman, really quickly, I mean, you work all the time at the Capitol. I have to get your reaction to this story that just broke in the last day. The Stephen Colbert show staffers that were arrested for wandering in the Capitol hallways without an escort, without credentials. Someone let them in, some congressional aide let them in, and then sort of ditched them and let them have their way with the Capitol. Your reaction to that, I mean, especially on a day where we're talking about the January 6th hearings, do you not find this all ironic?
Very ironic. I also am anxious to hear more of this story. I've only read and seen what I've seen on the news. But in my experience, if someone seems harmless, the Capitol Police would just ask them to leave. I am curious what led to them actually being arrested.
What was actually happening?
I suspect there was more to the story that we'll find out in the coming days.
We sure will. Thank you so much for joining us on this Saturday. We always appreciate it. Come back soon. Thank you, Congressman.
Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre shooting down calls to increase domestic oil production and oil drilling as Biden continues to shift the blame for sky-high gasoline prices onto oil companies. Fox News' Peter Doocy pressed the White House Press Secretary on the president's energy policy yesterday. Watch.
We need them to actually refine the crude oil, which is not happening, and that's what we're calling on oil companies to do.
Why not just drill more here in the U.S., though?
Because we don't need to do that.
We don't need to do that, as ExxonMobil is now firing back at Joe Biden's attacks. The oil company writing they have, quote, been investing more than any other company to develop U.S. oil and gas supplies. Government can promote investment through clear and consistent policy that supports U.S. resource development. That is not what we have had. Joining us right now is former White House Chief of Staff, former OMB Director Mick Mulvaney. Mick, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks very much for being here.
Thanks for having me back, Maria. Good to see you.
So what do you make? Oh, ExxonMobil pushing back on Joe Biden's attacks, and we know that he continues to say that there are leases that the oil companies are to blame for not taking advantages of those leases and putting more production on the market. What do you say?
Yeah, if you read the letter, it's not surprising. It's exactly what you and I talked about probably a year ago when oil prices first started to go up, which is, how do we deregulate? You read the letter, it says, look, please relieve us of the Jones Act. Please permit more oil pipelines. Do the regulatory things that the Trump administration did, that the Biden administration could do to make it easier to get the oil that we produce to market. And you see Karine Jean-Pierre say, let's just refine more. Because of government regulation, we haven't had a refinery built in this country since the 1970s. So to a certain extent, it's not surprising, as you and I have been talking about for a long time now. What's really surprising, though, Maria, is the letter itself, because Biden didn't write it. Presidents don't write those kinds of letters. It's written by staff. And what this means is that he surrounded himself with people who really don't understand capitalism and the profit motive. They surround himself with people who think the government can wave a magic wand and make people make more things. And that, I think, is more disturbing for the long run.
So who do you think is running the country then?
Oh, it's a chief of staff for sure. Ron Klain, I think, is probably running about 90% of the administrative, the executive branch of the government. Joe Biden, a nice guy, not running the day-to-day operation. And when you have a leader like that who's sort of disengaged, the chief of staff takes on a tremendously important role. Klain is a lot more liberal than Biden has been traditionally. I think that's why you're seeing this whole administration lurch to the left, is because the team they have built is a hardcore left-wing team, and they don't understand. You see a press secretary who says, well, what we just need to do is drill more. That doesn't solve the problem. You see a team blaming corporate greed for inflation when really it's the supply of goods into the marketplace vis-a-vis the amount of dollars chasing those goods. You have folks who don't understand the economy as it works, and that's the thing that worries me, because it doesn't bode well for the next 2 years.
And isn't it true that he's had so many executive orders that has discouraged oil companies from drilling and discouraged working with fossil fuel companies? Look at all the new rules at the Securities and Exchange Commission. And the public knows this. President Biden's approval rating is plummeting. A new Fox News poll finds that 57% of voters disapprove of the job that he's doing as president. 43% say that they approve. The Atlantic writer Mark Leibovich is calling on Biden to not seek re-election in a new opinion piece. He writes, quote, "Let me put this bluntly. Joe Biden should not run for re-election in 2024. He is too old." President Biden will turn 80 years old in November, Mick.
Yeah, look, you read the article, pretty soon, by the way, you're going to see approval ratings that are about the same of the rate of inflation, and the Democrats see that. I think they're afraid either he loses in 2024 or he wins in 2024. I'm afraid of him winning, especially if he surrounds himself with these same folks. The article I thought was well done. It raised a really good question as to whether or not we should have a mandatory retirement age in the White House, in this House, and the Senate, and on the Supreme Court. But generally speaking, what you're seeing is Democrats understand that Biden and this team that he has built cannot get us out of this situation, and they know that the voters know it. If they leave Biden at the top of the ticket, they're going to lose. The difficulty they face is they don't have any bench. If you read the article, it goes on to say that maybe Pete Buttigieg or Chris Murphy or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez could lead the party. That's their bench. That's what they've got. So as the Democrats have Ron DeSantis and Tim Scott and Mike Pence, they've got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So they're in a difficult situation. They know it. They don't understand inflation. They can't fix it. It's a dark time right now for the Democrat Party, which is why you're seeing all these internal rumblings make it out into the public.
Yeah, Liz Peek wrote about this last week. Go ahead, Liz.
Good morning. Mick, given the terrible approval ratings of the president, it's a pretty good chance that the Republicans take over Congress in the fall, I hope. What can they do to provide clarity and consistency on energy policy, which will encourage the oil industry to feel comfortable investing the billions of dollars required to get back to energy independence, to get our refining capacity up, et cetera? I mean, can that happen if we get that midterm win?
Probably not, and here's why. So much of what governs the oil and gas industry, especially in the short term, is regulatory. It takes a long time for legislative changes to kick in. But the regulations could be changed now. The Jones Act, for example, that Exxon asked to be relieved of, could be changed now. Permitting for the Keystone XL pipeline could go forward now. It doesn't take legislation to do that. It could be very quick. The Democrats will still be in charge of the executive branch. They'll still be in charge of the EPA, the Department of Energy. The important part after the Republicans take control in November, and they will, and Kevin McCarthy is going to be Speaker, is to simply remind people that we do understand economics. We do understand the marketplace. We do understand inflation. We do understand that if you make it easier to get goods to market, it will make everything cheaper, that raising interest rates doesn't create more computer chips or more cars on the lot. It actually makes it harder to do that. And they lay the foundation then for the 2024 election. So it is critical that we have that voice in Washington, D.C. You're going to have it, but keep in mind the presidency, the White House runs so much of the regulatory climate that it's going to be difficult to really change course just because of taking over the House of Representatives.
It's a good point, especially since he can go ahead and continue his executive orders and continue this green agenda.
Correct. The president has a tremendous amount of authority. Keep in mind, you talk about that green agenda. Go back and watch the spokesperson yesterday. She was so uncomfortable asking the question about drilling and so comfortable answering the question about their green agenda. They really don't understand how you produce energy. They don't understand how oil turns from out of the ground and into your car, but they think solar panels are wonderful. That's as frightening as anything I saw this week.
All right, Mick, good to talk with you. Thanks very much. Mick Mulvaney joining us.